Platform heat, signal lies. Rail yards don't sleep. They hum and shiver. After the last commuter coughs itself into the suburbs and the platforms learn how to be empty again, the city's trains return to the nest with the posture of bruised animals. The overhead lines sing in a pitch you feel more than hear. Brake rotors tick their cooling tick. The switch heaters mutter. In the control room, red and green jewels float on a black map like obedient stars. If you've never sat at a dispatcher's console at 2:13 a.m. and watched a whole city hold its breath on your screen, you don't know how a building can ask you for honesty without moving a single bolt. I'm Marco, night dispatcher, owner of a desk that has learned my elbows and a radio voice that traffic listens to even when it pretends not to. In front of me, two 27-inch monitors with our line diagram crawling across them, a keyboard so old the S key rattles like memory, a phone with more lines than I have friends, and a mug that says eye contact is a safety protocol. Behind me, the big glass and beyond it the yard, 14 tracks, 2 wash tunnels, the dead line where the retired cars sulk, and the shed we call the chapel because even the mechanics drop their voices inside it. Lena, my wife then, could make a room rehearse bet her manners just by standing in its doorway. Publicist for brands that needed to be forgiven for wanting attention, she produced launches and dinners that made people behave as if they'd invented taste. We met when our transit authority unveiled new rolling stock in a warehouse dressed as a cathedral. I liked the way she listened as if sentences had bones. She liked the way I could make steel say please. We kept Wednesdays. She'd show up with a tote of takeout, tap the glass with 2 knuckles, and slide in beside me in my wheeled chair like a decision I didn't have to be brave about. There's a notch in my lower back from the desk's stupid metal bracket. You could map our marriage with that bruise. If this sounds like bragging, I'm just building the room. Trains answer questions you haven't asked yet. So do people, if you learn where to look. The first odd thing looked like a favor I hadn't earned. Gate B, yard south, registered held open 6s at 00, 17-2 Thursdays in a row. Nobody holds a yard gate, it whines and tattles. A yard camera blinked out for 18 seconds at 00:21 and came back pretending it had only sneezed. A driver's cab in car 4129 smelled like mint when it should have smelled like machine oil and the ghost of coffee. On the intercom handset, a faint lipstick bruised the color of late plums. On the sand shoe of 4130, a clear silicone bead waited for a headlamp to discover it. Not an earring back, an earbud tip, designed to be lost. I told myself a generous story. Security cut a corner. A trainee ran a systems check and got cute. A PR pre-ride I hadn't been looped into. The yard breathes, it doesn't apologize. Then, the next Wednesday, held open 7s. The cab smelled like mint again. The lipstick bruise had moved and learned a little courage. Lena approached open like an architect lowering a blueprint onto a table you're both about to pretend is holy. With rules, she said, hip braced against our kitchen counter the way a sailor trusts the boat and not the water. With care, with us first. She didn't touch me while she said it, which in our house dialect means I'm trying to tell the truth. I wanted to be as big as track 12 on a snow night. We wrote it down, no one from the yard, no clients or press. Tell me before, not after. Protection always. Our bed, sovereign territory. The first week, she kissed me like an armistice. The second, like an apology the language was still inventing. The third, she texted at 11:07. Client dinner ran long. Don't wait up, and gate B at 00:17 held its breath for 7 seconds like the world enjoys a callback. I don't set traps in sanctuaries. I tune rooms. I dusted the inside plate of the south gate handle with a breath of chalk from the same kit we used to mark flats on wheels, just enough to bloom under a UV wand and leave a constellation on skin. I laid a length of monofilament at shin height across the catwalk between 4129 and 4130, not to snare, just to coax a stride into admitting it was in a hurry. I folded a cleaning rag into a neat square on the cab console and memorized one frayed thread's angle like a lover. I tightened the closer on the door to the chapel until it forgave patience and punished ambition. 00, 17 held sevens. 00, 21 camera blink. The chalk translated into faint galaxies on the gate plate. The monofilament lay on the catwalk in a respectful loop, moved aside by someone who understood how a trap deserves to be treated. The rag's thread shifted a degree left. Hands had borrowed my square to cushion somebody's knees. The cab was warm in the way bodies leave behind. The radio pushed a notch higher than my driver set it, mint arguing with grease. Lena stepped up to the glass at 00, 28 with fast hair and the steady mouth of a woman who could stage an apology as well as mean one. I clicked the door release, and she slipped into my chair's orbit like she still owned that right. When the UV wand hummed, a faint spray woke on the inside of her wrist where a pulse is stupid. She looked down, and her face did the arithmetic even before I said a number. "Don't make me your villain," she said, not pleading, just human tired. "I asked for before," I said. "I thought I did," she said, and in her grammar client dinner counted. She had kept tempo, I had demanded melody. He followed her in the way men enter rooms they've already auditioned in their heads. Jack's Orlov DJ, downtown darling, brand consultant if you asked his emails, headliner if you asked his eyebrows. He'd been on 2 of her launches. He wore a jacket over his shoulder like gravity is dress code. He glanced at the boards and then at his reflection in the glass because some men meet themselves first. "We'll go," he said to the room, respectful as a cat. "We won't perform in here," I said. I held the gate and let the night take them. The yard doesn't need a scene, it memorizes enough. We parted with competence. Lawyers in polite rooms moved paper back and forth like trains on short headways. She took the bar cart and the flutes and the blazer that taught rooms to behave. I kept the chipped mug that steals heat and the habit of speaking softly to steal. The yard exhaled in that way yards do, nasal breath, static. A cat we pretend not to feed darting under 4112 like a rumor. Work kept me from dissolving. Winter came with a personality. A switch heater died like a hero. We hissed it back to life with patience and a wrench. A new trainee called me sir twice, and then buddy when he forgot we were not friends. I learned to recognize the sound of a pantograph ice scraping by feel through the console. At 3 a.m. the whole city would turn its shoulder, and if you were quiet you could hear it. Riley walked into the chapel one night like someone who trusts rooms to forgive her boots. Rolling stock electrician, braid down her back, hands cut in clean half-moons. She smelled faintly of ozone, citrus hand cleaner and stubbornness. She laid a tool roll on the bench and unfurled it with the confidence of someone who loves objects in the same octave that I do. "Which one is sulking?" she asked. 4129's door relay, I said. "That thing where it forgets no means no." "Flirt," she said, and grinned like she just convinced the universe to hold a splice. We started with work verbs. She rewired, I reset. We coaxed half a dozen cars into remembering how to be polite to their own doors. She'd bring me coffee that tasted like good decisions and lean her hip against my console and watch the board breathe with me. "You counting minutes?" she'd ask when I drifted toward the clock. "Or sins?" I told her about the treaty, the chalk, the gate, the way a monofilament line can teach a stride to confess. She listened like a person who files screws by diameter in their head. You kept the place from being humiliated, she said, not praise, a diagnosis. The first time we kissed, we stood in the doorway of the chapel because doorways tell the truth. The cars slept behind us or pretended to. She tasted like orange and a mouth that had been patient long enough. She kept her eyes open for a heartbeat, not to check for cameras. No cameras in the chapel. Even Steele knows there should be rooms that don't keep a record. But to choose me again once she had my taste. My hand found the back of her neck where pulse negotiates with brains, and I felt the small stutter that can only be yes. We aren't idiots. Speed is what frightened people used to pretend they are. We made rules that kept our sanctuary a sanctuary. No kiss in a live cab. No hands near energized gear. Yes to the dead line under the off switch of the stars. Yes to the driver training simulator after we locked it out and put a handwritten sign on it that said "Do not learn." Yes to my office with the overhead lights down and the yard's hum climbing the glass like ivy. We counted to 10 and used 9, because the last minute belongs to the night. Lena returned in spring because the city loves symmetry. This time it was a ribbon cutting for the new extension, press volume set to performative awe. She came with a kid in a teal suit whose job was being looked at. Our eyes did the polite nod that says, we will not make the building carry what we can carry. Jax took a selfie with a train as if it were a celebrity doing him a favor. Riley stood at my elbow with a wrench in her back pocket like punctuation, and a smile she hadn't asked permission for. We were fine, or we were the kind of not fine that doesn't require a medic. Between speeches, I walked the platforms because platform concrete remembers footsteps, and sometimes mine feel better when they have company. A kid asked me if trains sleep. They blink, I said. He accepted the theology without argument. I pressed the button for a test announcement, and the PA gave me back my voice like a borrowed coat. Later, when the donors were done applauding themselves and the news had enough B-roll to prove the day happened, I found the Altoids tin in my desk, the kind with a hinge that likes to scold. Inside, the 2 clear earbud tips I'd collected like quotation marks around a chapter, and a bobby pin bent into a question mark. I snapped the lid shut gently. Not trophies. Proof that book's close. Riley found me by the glass with the yard thrown out flat and faithful under the sodium lights, my hand on the cold. You look like you're forgetting to leave, she said. I'm practicing, I said. For what? She pressed her hip into mine, undeniable as gravity. For being a guest, I said, and the yards and their rules shivered in the glass like a yes. We are not cinematic, but sometimes the building stages us anyway. Her hands are calloused in the places my ribs know now. In the simulator's dark, with the LED stars lying to us in kind ways, she straddled my lap and set her forehead to mine, and we laughed into each other's mouths when my radio, clipped to my belt because duty and arousal share a belt loop, crackled with a driver 3 lines over asking for permission to sneeze. I thumbed the transmit, voice steady like good track. Proceed, I said, which made her laugh again in a frequency I can't help but collect. When we take the dead line, we treat it like a chapel. Boots on, mouths patient, hands honest. The cars sigh even when they are alive. I slide my palm down the warm of her spine where the day keeps its teeth. She tips her head back and gives me the throat that means trust is a verb. The smell of brake dust in our hair and citrus cleaners on her sleeve, and that animal part of my brain that can tell a car number by smell, all of it braids into something prayer adjacent. Our erotics are not about speed or conquest. They're about voltage and ground, pressure and release, a relay that decides to close because you asked it in the language it understands. There's a version of this story where I ruin people. I could have rolled back camera feeds, called security with a tone, posted Gate B's little 7-second sermons to 1,000 strangers who want blood more than honesty. That version ends with applause and a building that looks at me different forever. I didn't choose it. I walked 2 bodies out of a door and let a sanctuary keep its dignity. I chose to be a man my consoles would still trust in a storm. Summer stuck to us like a problem we were too lazy to solve. The yard taught me the names of 3 cats I pretended not to care about. Riley taught me that glass fuses tell you they're dying by blanching right before they fail, and that my temper turns quiet a full 5 minutes before my mouth catches up. I learned the look she gives a stubborn relay just before it repents, a patient smile with her teeth showing only to the part that needs to be scared. She learned my habit of stopping in the middle of a sentence to listen to a note in the rail, and then finishing the thought as if nothing had spoken. One night, Gateby chimed at 00, 17 out of pure habit. My chest forgot and remembered in the same breath. The camera showed nothing but the alley working on being mysterious. I laughed, and Riley, hands in my pockets like she invented theft, laughed with me because sanctuaries have a sense of humor when they decide you're housebroken. If you ride our line at stupid o'clock, and you hear a voice on the PA that sounds like it was built to be believed, that's me after a good night. If you glimpse a woman in coveralls on a platform, grease at her wrist like a bracelet, stretching her back as if she's asking the sky to try harder. If she grins as the train doors close, and you wonder who that grin is for, you can keep it. It belongs to both of us and to the building and to anyone who has ever forgiven Steele for being complicated. I lock the chapel and feel the burr on the key where other men's stories have worn it honest. I step into the yard air and the overhead sings a high, thin song that teeth understand. Riley steals my last clean minute because she can. I let her because that rule outlived all the others. Tip the night. We walk the ballast to the employee gate with hands shoved into each other's pockets like we're smuggling warmth. The city beyond the fence pretends to sleep. The yard blinks. The board inside keeps its little stars lit for me until I switch them off. Rail yards don't sleep, they hum and shiver. They forgive slowly and then all at once when you stop making them host scenes they didn't audition for. I put the Altoids tin back in my drawer with the old timetable pages and the safety zines and close it like a period. Not a full stop, more like a semicolon, 2 clauses joined by a breath we finally had the right to take. We have 10. We use 9. The last minute belongs to Steele, and to the mouths we put on it, and to the quiet we leave behind so trains will keep telling us the truth.